Lesson 4. I am responsible for my own life. All of us at one time or another have felt like our lives were spinning out of control. Unforeseen obstacles pop up. Problems come out of nowhere. Relationship problems, money problems, work problems, etc., etc. It's easy to find other people to blame and other circumstances to blame. My mother-in-law doesn't treat me right. My spouse won't let me. I was born too tall. I was born too early. And here's my favorite. I was just dealt a bad hand of cards. Another one of the cornerstones of success, however, is believing the idea that even though sometimes things seem unprovoked and random, at the end of the day, we are all responsible for our own lives. You hold in your hand the pen that writes the story of your life. In fact, Paul's law number 4 says, each and every one of us is fully responsible for our own lives. Period. You know, these days that's actually becoming a relatively unpopular idea. We've become a culture that loves to blame other people. But many great leaders and thinkers throughout the ages have written about this idea in one form or another. Einstein said, we must cease attributing our problems to our environment and learn again to exercise our will, our personal responsibility. Brian Tracy, who wrote a great book called Peak Performance, wrote, peak performance begins, and we're going to come back to that word in a second. Peak performance begins with your taking complete responsibility for your life and everything that happens to you. Now, he didn't write that's, it would help. He didn't write, it might be wonderful if. He wrote, it begins. Peak performance begins with the idea. You can't do anything else until after you have that idea. And that's why I call it one of the cornerstones. Oprah Winfrey believes that you are responsible for your life. You can't keep blaming somebody else for your dysfunction. Now, the good news is that this course has lots of great ideas and techniques to help you achieve the results that you want. Personal, economic, professional, spiritual. However, none of these ideas are going to be very helpful to you at all unless and until you come to accept the fact that in order for your life to change, you're going to have to change. And there's really only one person in the entire universe that can do that. You. Now, the good news is that you can change. All of us can change. We can make great changes. In fact, we can make unbelievable changes in a relatively short period of time. But why bother? What are the benefits? Well, as already noted, one of the main benefits is that it is absolutely one of the cornerstones of success. You're not going to have a great deal of success unless and until you come to that belief. Now, the second great benefit is that once you accept the responsibility for your own life, that really helps your self-esteem. And that's another one of the cornerstones that we already talked about. In fact, Joan Didion wrote, and I love this, that this belief of self-responsibility is, quote, the source from which self-respect springs. Again, those are powerful, powerful words. And speaking of power, another great reason is the power and freedom that it gives you once you believe that. Once you actually take responsibility for your own life, you understand that, wow, I really can do just about anything I want. It's my life. I'm free to do whatever I want. Another positive thing about this belief is that it really does help you solve problems. Because when you take responsibility for things, your brain is going to be in that mode of, well, okay, I guess I'll solve the problem if it's my job. It comes back to that asking questions that we talked about in chapter 3. Quite simply, by taking responsibility for your own life, in a way, you're giving your brain permission to solve the problems. And that's a big part of that. Once you add that belief to the questions that we talked about, shaping your questions, your self-talk in the way that moves you toward your goals and not away from your goals, once you add those two things together, it becomes a very powerful dynamic. Another benefit to all this is that it forces you to admit your mistakes. When you're responsible for your own life, and your life isn't going as you want, there's only one person that you can blame, that's yourself. And that kind of humility is going to help all of your relationships, personal, professional, etc., etc. And the last benefit that we're going to talk about here, even though there's more, is that it makes you a better role model. And this is not only important if you have kids, it's extremely important if you have kids, but even a role model for your friends and your coworkers and your professional acquaintances. If they see you taking responsibility for your life, it's going to make them much more willing to do that for themselves. And that's going to help not only you, but them also. Now, when you take responsibility for your life, however, you want to be careful not to go too far and get into blaming yourself for every little tiny thing that goes wrong. Again, it comes back to what we learned in chapter 3, asking the right questions. Don't be asking yourself things like, oh God, I'm so stupid, how could I have done that? Because your brain will answer that question. Ask yourself things that move you toward your goals. Ask yourself things that build you up. Why am I able to bounce back quickly from problems? And that kind of thing. Again, we have lots of life-changing questions at the end of this section as well. Now, one way to see if you're being too hard on yourself is to ask yourself, would I say that same thing to somebody else that I love that's in a similar circumstance? If the answer is no, then you definitely want to go back and listen to lesson 3 again and start asking yourself some more powerful questions. Even though you can't control everything in your life, you can control how you think, how you feel, and how you act in response to the circumstances of your life. And there is perhaps no better example of this anywhere in the world than Nelson Mandela. He was a leader in South Africa who was put in prison purely for political reasons for 27 long and brutal years. At the end of that time, he wrote a magnificently powerful quote. He wrote, "Hating clouds the mind. It gets in the way of strategy. Leaders cannot afford to hate." And this from a man who was in jail for 27 years. And during those 27 years, he wasn't able to control much. But what he could control is his thoughts and his feelings and his emotions. And he did. For 27 years, he didn't let the hatred overcome him. He kept his eye on the goal, which for him was nothing less than the liberation of one of the most repressed countries in the entire world. And when he finally was released, he did change history. He did lead that country in a revolution and became the first elected black president of South Africa. And along the way, he won a little tiny thing called the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, if Nelson Mandela can endure all that for 27 years and then come out to peaceably change the course of history, can you learn to take responsibility for your own life and ask yourself questions that put you in a better frame of mind? Of course you can. And not only can you alter your life, but you can make such changes in your life that you will positively affect the lives of thousands and thousands of other people. Because, as Tony Robbins is always saying, you were born for greatness. Here's some more life-changing questions. Why do I refuse to give up control of my life to someone else? Why do I feel good about taking responsibility for my own life? Why do I consistently choose to either change the situation, change the way I feel about it, or decide to accept it? Why am I willing to create the life of my dreams? Why am I willing to learn and grow? Why do I believe that making mistakes is just a part of learning and growing? Why am I a great problem solver? Why am I consistently able to stop blaming others and myself and utilize my brain power in positive ways? Why am I consistently able to stop making excuses and instead think of possible ways to overcome and solve problems? Why is my spirit unbroken? Why am I able to remain unbroken in any circumstance? And as always, modify those questions, add your own questions, make it work for you, because you're responsible for your own life.